Hi, it's Stacy Ritz. I'm the Assistant Dean of the Bachelor of Health Sciences program. And in this little video, I'm going to give you a little bit of insight and try and explain some of the most common questions about our admissions process. Really, I can kind of summarize it in one slide. We use two factors to make our admissions decisions. One is the GPA, which is based on 6 grade 12 U or M courses or their equivalent, and one is the score on the supplementary application. So in terms of the GPA, to be eligible for admission, an applicant must have at least a 90 average in the following 6 courses: English, chemistry, biology, math, non-math, non-science, non-tech, and one other course, whatever your best other course is. And the average of those 6 together must be 90 or above to be considered eligible. You can have some of them that are below 90 as long as the average of the 6 is 90 or above. And then the other factor is the scores on the supplementary application. So applicants must complete 3 supplementary application questions, which are scored by a pool of reviewers drawn from our graduating class of 4th-year students, our instructors, and staff in our office. And each question that is answered is scored by 2 different people, which means that each applicant has their supplementary application read by 6 different people, and the scores from those readers are averaged to complete the supplementary application score. And then those 2 factors together are used to make our admissions decisions. The timeline of our admissions process actually begins in August or September when we post our supplementary applications for the year, the questions for the year. So applicants who are thinking about applying to Health Sci will be able to go to our website and see the sub-app questions for the upcoming year, starting very early, usually late summer or very early in the fall. Then in January of each year, students must apply by the UAC deadline. Once we have your applications in hand, you'll get an email from us in early February with the information you need to log in to our online supplementary application submission website. And each applicant will be given a window of time during which they should go in, log in, and enter their sub-app answers. Now, the expectation is that you will have been working on these questions for a good while before February rolls around, so that by the time you actually get your login information, all you need to do is log in, type in the answers that you've prepared, and hit submit. Then we spend some time in February, March, and early April scoring your sub-app questions. And then once we get the interim semester 2 grades from the high schools, which typically happens in the last week of April or first week of May, we then proceed to synthesize all that data, make our decisions, and send out offers of admission in early May. So that's sort of the overview. Some of the common questions we get about this process, for example, are about whether or not we consider extracurricular activities. The short answer is no. We don't ask applicants for any information about their extracurricular activities, although certainly some applicants will talk about their extracurriculars in their sub-app answers if it's relevant, but that's not required at all. And it's not something that we look at as a separate factor. Some people ask, what's the weighting of the GPA versus the sub-app? And the answer is that it's not strictly a mathematical calculation of a formula of 50% average or 50% sub-app or anything like that. That's not how it's done. It's a more iterative process than that. And so what we end up doing is we take the supplementary application scores and look at clusters by sub-app score. So in the cluster with the highest sub-app scores, we set GPA cutoff for that highest cluster. And in the very highest cluster, the cutoff GPA is 90. So the students with the applicants with these strongest sub-apps have a cutoff of 90. As we move down to subapp clusters that have slightly lower scores, the GPA cutoff within each cluster will get a little bit higher. So the next cluster of subapp scores might have a cutoff of, say, 92, and the next cluster may have a cutoff of 95 or something like that, until we get down to the cluster of subapp scores that's at the cutoff value. And in that case, the GPA cutoff within that group might be as high as 96 or 97. But the actual specific details of that vary from year to year depending on the distribution of subapp scores and GPA within any given applicant pool. So it's that kind of iterative back and forth and a setting of a GPA cutoff within each cluster. What that means, it means a couple of things, is that first of all, it means that even if you have a very, very, very high GPA, a very, very high GPA cannot compensate for a very weak supplementary application. Certainly, in order to get an offer of admission, you have to have quite a strong subapp. On the other hand, though, writing a very strong supplementary application can offset having a relatively low GPA. As long as it's in that range, you meet the 90 cutoff, you can absolutely have an offer of admission with a low 90 average if you've got a very strong subapp. Certainly there's some mythology out there that suggests that, don't bother applying to health sci if you have a low 90 because you won't get in. That's not true. It's very much not true. We admit students across the whole range from 90 up to 100, and we reject students across the whole range from 90 up to 100 because that supplementary application is a very significant factor. I think some of the misconceptions around that come from examples where people will say, well, I know somebody who had a 98 average and they didn't get into health sci, so therefore you need higher than a 98 to get in. That's a misunderstanding. That is not how it works. And if you have a 90 or above, you need to write us a good subapp to be competitive for admission. That's really what it boils down to. Some people worry that, if they get somebody who's a really hard marker for their supplementary application, that might sink their application. I don't see that as being a particularly significant concern because each application has 6 different markers at least. And so one person's evaluation is not going to be sufficient to sink your application. And at the same time, when we do the analysis of our supplementary application scores, part of our process is to go through and identify any situations where there's a significant discrepancy between the scores of the reviewers for a given question. And in those cases, we have an additional review to address that discrepancy. So this isn't a situation where any, one particularly harsh or one particularly generous person can sway the entire decision. It's more robust than that. Some of the other major question we get is, what are you looking for in the supplementary application? Of course, everybody wants to know, if having a strong subapp is so important, then what do we want to see that makes a subapp strong? And the truth is that our subapp questions are designed so that there is not any correct answer and there's no wrong answer either. There's nothing specific that we are looking for applicants to say. What we are looking for and what makes a good subapp answer is one where the applicant has shown us something that is particularly compelling, particularly interesting, particularly noteworthy, and kind of elevates their response above the others in some way. And what it is that sort of certain something that elevates a response above others, there's no one specific thing, but it could be a range of things. So sometimes it's somebody who, has come up with a particularly unique or creative or unusual response to the prompt. But it's not always someone who's just really off the wall and outside the box. Sometimes it's somebody who is discussing an idea that, may have been discussed by many other applicants, but they're expressing themselves in a particularly clear, compelling, interesting way. And so really what it boils down to is we are looking for something, for people who have something compelling to say for themselves. And I would often tell applicants that if you are spending a lot of time trying to think about what it is we want to hear and trying to figure out what you need to write to meet our expectations, you're going in the wrong direction. We would like you not to think about what it is we want to hear. We want you to think very deeply and very carefully about what it is you have to say. That's what we want to hear. We want to hear your true voice. We want to hear your best ideas. We want to hear what excites you the most. We want to hear what you're most interested in. And that is what is going to be most rewarded by this process. So don't think too much about what it is we're looking for. Think about what you have to say. That's what we want to hear. So hopefully that answers a bunch of your questions about our admissions process. There's lots of FAQs on our website as well if you wanted to go in and look up a few more of those things. So I'll do one more of these videos to talk about what to do with a health sci degree.